Welcome to True Crime Stories for English Learners, where real-life mysteries meet clear and simple English.
The Great Train Robbery, 1963. It was a quiet night in the English countryside. The sky was dark and there was no wind. Most people were sleeping in their houses. But in a small field near the train tracks, a group of men waited in the shadows. They were calm, silent, and very focused. They watched the track and listened carefully. They were waiting for something big. At 3 a.m., a bright light appeared in the distance. It was the night mail train from Glasgow to London. The men looked at each other. This was the moment they had planned for many months. The leader nodded once. The plan was about to begin. The Great Train Robbery happened on August 8, 1963. It became one of the most famous crimes in British history. The robbery was planned by a group of 15 men. They were not dangerous killers. Most of them were thieves who wanted money but tried to avoid violence. Their leader was Bruce Reynolds. He was 31 years old and known for clever ideas. He liked high-risk plans and wanted one big job that would change his life. The train they wanted to stop carried old banknotes from Scotland to London. These banknotes were no longer in use, but the money was still real. On this night, the train carried more than 2.6 million pounds. In today's money, that would be many tens of millions of pounds. The men knew this was a once-in-a-lifetime chance. The group spent months preparing. They studied the timetable. They visited the countryside many times. They learned how the signal system worked. They even practiced stopping a train in a safe area. Everything seemed ready. And now, on this silent night, they waited for the train to come. The plan was simple in theory, but difficult in practice. The men needed to stop the train at a very exact place. They chose a small bridge called Brightigo Bridge. It was far from towns and far from police patrols. The bridge also had a quiet field where the men could work in the dark. To stop the train, they created a false red signal light. They climbed up to the signal post and connected a battery. When the train driver saw the red light, he believed it was an official stop signal. He slowed down and finally stopped the train exactly where the men wanted. But something unexpected happened. The second man in charge of the train system, called the second man, climbed down to check the signal. This was not part of the robbers' plan. They wanted him to stay inside, but he walked toward the false signal, confused. The robbers had to move faster now. 2 men grabbed him, but they did not hurt him badly. They simply held him and told him to stay quiet. The plan changed, but they continued anyway. There was no turning back. When the train stopped, the leader gave a short signal. The men ran to the locomotive. They had gloves, masks, and simple tools. They were not carrying guns. The plan was to move quickly and avoid violence. The main driver, Jack Mills, opened his window. He was surprised to see men outside. Before he could react, one robber climbed up and pulled him gently toward the side. They told him they only wanted the money car. Mills refused to help them move the train forward, so one of the robbers had to take his place. The robbers had trained a man to drive the train. His name was known only as the train driver inside the gang. But now there was a new problem. The robber driver could move the train, but not very well. He struggled with the controls. The locomotive jerked forward and stopped suddenly. The men panicked quietly. The money car was still too far from the bridge where the rest of the gang waited. But after several minutes, they managed to move the train the short distance needed. Now the money car was in the right position. Inside the money car were 128 sacks of old banknotes. The sacks were heavy. Together, they weighed more than 2 tons. The men formed a human chain. They passed the sacks from hand to hand, working fast but quietly. In less than 20 minutes, they moved all the sacks into a waiting truck. They were sweating and tired but excited. Everything was going according to plan again. The truck was now full of money sacks. The men closed the back door and checked the locks. They worked fast and stayed calm. They did not shout. They did not fight. Everything was controlled and careful. The leader, Bruce Reynolds, looked around. He checked the bridge, the train, in the area below. There were no lights, no cars, no movement. The countryside was silent. It looked like they had succeeded. Before leaving, the men helped the train crew. They moved the men back into the cabin so they would stay safe. They told the crew that help would come soon. Then the robbers left the scene. They drove the truck to a waiting Land Rover. The group split into teams and followed the same long, dark road. They stayed off the main highways and used small country lanes. They wanted to avoid any police cars. After almost 1 hour of careful driving, they reached their hideout. The hideout was a small old farmhouse called Leatherslade Farm. The farm was empty, quiet, and far from the city. It was the perfect place to hide after such a big crime. The men carried the sacks inside and counted the money. They were shocked by the total amount. They knew it was more than 2.6 million pounds, but seeing it with their own eyes felt different. They had never seen so much cash. It filled the table and the floor. They worked through the night, sorting the money into piles. Some men laughed, some men cried, some men just stared at the huge stacks. They believed their lives would change forever. At 3:30 a.m., the train crew finally contacted the police. At first, the police thought it was a small robbery. Trains had been robbed before, but never on this level. But when they arrived and saw the empty money car, they were shocked. This was not a normal crime. This was something huge. Soon, the news spread across Britain. Every newspaper wrote about the robbery. People talked about it on the radio. Everyone wanted answers. Who stole the money? How did they stop the train? Where did they go? And how could they take so much cash without hurting anyone? The police started one of the biggest investigations in the country's history. More than 100 officers were assigned to the case. They visited nearby farms, roads, and villages. They collected fingerprints, tire marks, and small clues from the train. One important clue came from the train signal. The police found wires and a battery near the post. This showed that the robbers had created a false signal. This was evidence of planning and skill. But the biggest clue was still waiting at Leatherslade Farm. The robbers stayed inside the farm for a few days. They did not go outside. They played cards, counted money, and waited for the situation to calm down. But some men became bored and careless. One man touched doors and tables without gloves. Another man left a milk bottle with fingerprints. Someone even wrote down scores from a card game on a piece of paper. They forgot one rule: never leave evidence. After a few days, the leader decided it was time to leave the farm. They packed the money into separate bags and left the area at different times. Before leaving, they told 2 members to burn the farm. The fire was supposed to destroy all evidence, but the fire never happened. The 2 men tried, but they became nervous. They left quickly and decided not to burn anything. This mistake changed everything. A few days later, the police found the farmhouse. Inside, they found fingerprints, tools, food, and many clues. The police knew the robbers had stayed there. They now had real evidence. After the police found the farm, the investigation moved fast. They checked the fingerprints and connected them to known criminals. Many robbers had a history of theft, so their names were already in the police system. One by one, several men were arrested. Bruce Reynolds was able to escape for a longer time, but others were caught quickly. The police also found some of the money. The trial began in 1964. It was a huge event in Britain. Reporters waited outside the court every day. People wanted to see the men who had committed the famous robbery. The court showed pictures of the money sacks and the signal light. The story became even more famous. The judge believed the robbery was a serious crime because it was planned for months. Even though the men did not use guns, the judge still gave very long sentences. Many robbers received 30 years in prison. This surprised the public. Some people thought the punishment was too long. Others thought it was fair. One of the most famous robbers was Ronnie Biggs. He escaped from prison in 1965 by climbing over a wall. He ran away to France, Portugal, and finally Brazil. He lived there for many years. People around the world talked about him. He became a symbol of escape and freedom, even though he was a criminal. Bruce Reynolds also stayed hidden for a long time. He ran from country to country. He lived in Mexico and became hard to track. But in 1968, he returned to Britain and was arrested. Slowly, over many years, more money was found, but a large part of the stolen money was never recovered. No one knows exactly where it went. Some people think it was hidden in secret places. Others think it was spent quickly. Even today, the Great Train Robbery is one of the most famous crimes in the United Kingdom. It was shocking because it was big, clever, and almost without violence. It showed how planning and teamwork could create a historic event. Many years have passed since 1963. The train tracks are still there. The bridge is still standing. But the countryside is quiet again. If you visit the place today, you will not see any sign of the crime. Only the wind and the trees remember that night. The story became part of British history. People still talk about it, write books, and make films. It is a story about planning, teamwork, mistakes, and consequences. It shows that even the biggest crime can leave small clues, and sometimes small clues can tell the whole story.
Another dark chapter closed, but the mystery of human nature continues. Thanks for listening to True Crime Stories for English Learners. Don't forget to subscribe and join me next time for another real story that's stranger than fiction.